Good evening and welcome to the Pastor Study. Before I start, some of you may be wondering what happened to Sunday morning's message. Unfortunately, we had some technical difficulties that we were unable to fix on the fly, so Sunday did not get recorded. We should be back with recording again next Sunday and have that available for you through the normal channels. In John chapter 10, verse 10, Jesus tells us that he said this. He says, I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. Or if you're reading from the King James, to have it more abundantly. So that raises a question. More abundantly than what? Well, he answers that in the first part of that verse, which I on purpose left out. The first part of that verse says, the thief comes only for to steal, kill, and destroy. And then he goes on to say that I have come that they may have life and have it more abundantly. More abundantly than what Satan will allow us to have. More abundantly than what his plan to steal, kill, and destroy will allow us to keep or to maintain or to function with. And I think more than what we had before we found Jesus. Because certainly things change when that takes place. So we're fighting two problems. We're fighting a battle, if you will, on two fronts. The first is directly Satan himself. The plans that he has are not plans to prosper us, as God says that he has for us, but rather they are plans to destroy us. And even more so since we have Christ in our lives. But we're also fighting the change from the old man to the new man, from the old nature to the new nature. And this is what we're going to be talking about the next several Sundays, at least the next three, maybe more to work our way through it. How are we supposed to be different than what we were before? How are we supposed to live more abundantly, if you will, than we did before? You see, there were events accomplished between the cross and the empty tomb, between the crucifixion and the resurrection, that enable us to be much more than we could be before that took place, much more than we could be without that, certainly much more than we would ever be had we not accepted Jesus into our lives and appropriated those events and the results of those events for ourselves, for our lives. You see, our mission is to understand what those things are so that we can overcome Satan's schemes, so that we can become all that we can be. If I can reach backwards and quote an army platitude, or maybe more importantly to quote Jesus, to live life and live it more abundantly. You see, to do that, we've got to understand what Jesus did on the cross and the benefits of that. Not just the cross, but the resurrection and everything in between. To do that would take much more time than what I've got tonight. But again, over the next several weeks, we'll be looking at some of these things and how they impact us and how they enable us to be everything Jesus calls us to be. And then there's the issue of not only overcoming what the enemy has done to us, not only overcoming our old nature, which we are born with, but also overcoming ourselves and overcoming our past. To put those things in the proper perspective relative to Jesus' priorities and Jesus' promises. And that is a whole lot more difficult than it sounds. In fact, it's a whole lot easier to say it than it is to do it. Every one of us carries baggage with us from our old nature, from the things that we did before we accepted Christ, from the things that were done to us, and if we'll be real about it, the things we've done perhaps since we've accepted Christ. And the enemy will be there as the accuser of the brethren to remind us of all of those things, to do his very best to convince us that we are not worthy of the things that Jesus died to give us. And in truth, he's right. We are not worthy. We have no righteousness of our own. Only that of Jesus. In fact, Isaiah puts it this way, our righteousness is as filthy rags. So it becomes our responsibility, number one, to resist Satan. Scripture says if we resist him, he'll flee from us. Number two, to understand what was done for us on the cross and appropriate that for ourselves. And that means not only appropriating it mentally, giving assent to it, but also appropriating that emotionally, and enfolding that in our behavior, our choices, our everyday actions. And then thirdly, making sure that we don't let our past destroy our future. All of that, we are enabled to do all of that through what Jesus did on the cross, through the power that is demonstrated by the empty tomb. And over the next several weeks, on Sunday, we'll be looking at those very things. What is it that stops us? How do we deal with it? And how do we become everything that Jesus enables us to be, that he plans for us to be? Because the reality is we're generally our own worst enemies. We've got to get over ourselves to become everything he wants us to be. And with that thought, I'll leave you this evening and look forward to seeing you next week back in the Pastor Study.